Hey guys, tonight we're diving straight into misery, superstition, and the kind of magic that mostly gets you burned at the stake. This is 24 Hours as a Medieval Witch. If you've ever wondered what it's like to be blamed for bad weather, sour milk, and every weird noise after dark, stick around. This is a mildly disturbing tales, ones you can feel under your fingernails. If stories like this help you unwind, feel free to subscribe for more. Now, dim the lights, settle in. Let's see if you make it to sunrise. And if you wake up wiser, we won't apologize. Let's begin. You open your eyes before the sun has even bothered to show up. The world is a gentle grey. Not quite night, not quite morning. There's light, but it's the shy kind. More suggestion than illumination, seeping through a single, glassless hole in your wall of mud and wattle. Don't expect a gentle chorus of birds, or a babbling brook outside your window. No, the first thing you hear is the busy rustle of mice in the straw nearby, your unofficial, uninvited housemates, who have absolutely no intention of ever paying rent. And somewhere, muffled but persistent, a pig is grumbling. Yes, that's right. You share your humble home not just with your family, but with the family pig. Congratulations. You've just woken up in what could charitably be called a medieval cottage, but is, more honestly, a single-room biohazard zone. The air is heavy, thick with the scent of old smoke, unwashed bodies, and the complicated perfume of too many living creatures breathing, eating, and existing together in far too little space. If you've ever wondered what it's like to live inside a barnyard and still pay rent, this is your answer. Every inhale is a lesson in earthy, rustic aromatherapy. They say scent is the strongest trigger for memory. Well, this is a memory your nose will never, ever let you forget. Your bed is a mat of straw, woven just well enough to keep the ground at bay, and just badly enough that every stick and stem insists on saying good morning to your back. The blanket is thin, coarse wool, scratchy, a little damp, and scented faintly of wet dog and something else. Existential dread, perhaps. It offers as much warmth as a politician's promise. Privacy? That's a modern luxury. Your children, if you have any, are huddled nearby, dreaming fitful dreams on their own straw piles. The family goat has decided your foot is the best available pillow, and he's not moving. If you listen closely, you can hear the persistent cough of someone on the other side of the room. Maybe a child, maybe you. It's the background music of the Middle Ages, thanks to the central hearth, which is equal parts kitchen, heater, and impromptu lung workout. No gentle drift of fresh air here, just a lingering haze, wrapping the room in a woolly, smoky embrace. You might think about stretching, greeting the new day with enthusiasm. Instead, your body creaks and groans, each joint offering commentary on another night spent tangled in straw and regret. There's no alarm clock, of course, just the insistent biological reminder of a full bladder and the slow swell of noise from the village outside. If you try to sit up gracefully, the straw clings to your hair like a jealous ex. Somewhere, a flea or two reminds you that you're never truly alone. Your feet touch the floor, which is packed earth and dried mud, cold and unsympathetic. It feels less like flooring and more like the ground itself is quietly judging your life choices. There's no running water, no tile, no porcelain, and certainly nothing that could be called a bathroom. Your first noble act of the day? Locating the chamber pot and hoping, just this once, the pig hasn't knocked it over. With a little luck and some careful tiptoeing, you brave the morning chill to empty it on the communal dung heap. Or, if you're feeling particularly rebellious, maybe the nearest ditch. Then it's time for a brisk splash of water from the rain barrel, if there's any left. No soap, no toothbrush, no deodorant. Just you, the morning air, and a quiet, universal understanding that this is as fresh as you're going to get today. And so begins your journey. Welcome to another day as a medieval every-person. Suspected healer, potential witch, part-time barnyard resident. It's only going to get smellier from here. Well done. You've survived the chill, the creaking joints, and the morning's most pressing business with the chamber pot. Now, it's time for what passes in this century for a reward. Breakfast. Go ahead. Close your eyes and forget, just for a second, your favorite coffee or that perfect golden toast. Here, in your little medieval corner of the world, breakfast is not about pleasure. It's not even about taste. It's about keeping your body moving. Just enough, for just a little longer. You shuffle toward the central hearth, a blackened pit in the middle of your only room, the fire inside little more than a stubborn orange glow. It spits smoke at your ankles, and every now and then sends up a tiny spark that eyes your straw mattress as if to say, not today, but soon. Your kitchen, if you can call it that, is nothing more than a dusty corner shared with every other aspect of your existence. There are no countertops, no pantry, no polished pots gleaming in the morning sun. Just a few battered clay vessels, a single wooden spoon worn thin by years of stirring, and a thin coating of honest resignation settling over everything. On the menu, gruel. Not a hearty stew, not even the comfort of simple soup. This is gruel in its truest form. A pale, lukewarm slurry of water and whatever grain was available, likely barley or oats. If you're lucky, there's a hint of emmer wheat. If you're really lucky, there isn't anything moving in it. Each spoonful tastes faintly of mud, smoke, and the echo of every breakfast that came before. Occasionally, you discover something unexpected. A bit of chaff, a broken grain, perhaps a protein-rich insect that wandered in, unsure whether to stay or escape. You eat it anyway. It's all calories in the end. Primitive, unplanned paleo, nature's gift, or maybe her little joke. There's no dining table, no comforting chair. The floor is your seat, the wall your backrest. You squat low, legs braced, and scoop up the greyish porridge, using a crust of bread that's seen better centuries. It's hard, dense, and sharp at the edges, the kind of bread that could defend you from a robber or chip your last good tooth. In every bite, a little grit, a reminder that the local miller's stones are generous with their contributions. To wash it all down? Water, of course. Not crystal clear, not filtered, certainly not chilled. This is water from the communal well, shared with every person, every animal, and every cloudburst that's wandered by. It has character. It also has the potential to introduce you to the less charming side of medieval microbiology. With every sip, you roll the dice. Will it be hydration or a new adventure in digestive distress? Only time will tell. The flies are ever present. They dance around your face, your food, your cup, relentless little critics unimpressed with your culinary skills. You wave them away with one hand, eat with the other, and accept their company as another part of the morning routine. You don't linger. This isn't brunch, it's refueling. As you finish, you wipe your mouth on the back of your hand, no napkins here, and taste the familiar blend of grain, wood smoke, and the faint, unshakable tang of regret. Congratulations, you're fed, at least for now, and the day with all its work and worries is waiting just outside your door. Breakfast, if we're generous enough to call it that, is behind you. Now it's time for the work that gives your life both its sense of purpose and its steady supply of anxiety. It's time to gather what you need from the world beyond your door. You don't stroll into a neat little shop or thumb through a catalogue. No, your pharmacy is outside, in the tangled edges of fields, along the muddy line where forest meets village, among the places that always seem just a little too damp, too shadowy, too much themselves. Mother Nature is your only supplier, and she's known for her sense of humor. So you pack your leather pouch, grab your small, blunt knife, and step out into the morning. The air is brisk, scented with cold mud, wood smoke, and that faint, unmistakable note of something livestock-related. Your boots squelch in last night's rain, and every step away from the safety of your home is a step towards someone else's suspicion. This isn't a gentle stroll. It's a careful hunt for very particular things. The plants that heal, and sometimes, if you aren't careful, the plants that harm. There's henbane, hiding low among the weeds, its pale flowers promising relief from pain, or, with the wrong touch, dreams so vivid they might make a person question reality. Mandrake crouches deeper, roots twisted, rumored to scream when pulled free, though you've learned it's usually your own startled yelp that carries on the wind. And then there's belladonna, beautiful in the way danger often is, its berries glossy and dark, used for medicine or misfortune, or the curious art of widening one's eyes. You know the difference, most days, between a remedy and a mistake. Years of trial and error, yours and others, have taught you to watch the leaves, to trust your nose, to say a silent word of thanks or apology as you snip a stem or dig at a stubborn root. Each plant carries with it the hope of easing someone's pain, or the risk of an awkward conversation about why the neighbors are suddenly seeing angels in the kitchen. You work quietly, glancing over your shoulder now and then, not just for the watchful village eyes, though there are always a few, but for the quiet fear that whispers, what if they think this is magic and not simply knowledge? What if one day the line between healer and heretic blurs, and you find yourself on the wrong side of everyone's suspicion? Still, you carry on, because someone needs your teas and tinctures. Someone needs your hands and your care, and, if you're honest, your own family needs the few coins you earn. Just be careful with the pretty berries. There's always one more thing out here that looks harmless, tastes sweet, and remembers exactly who didn't listen to the warnings. You made it back from the wilds, herbs in your pouch, mud on your boots, and only a faint suspicion that you grabbed something you shouldn't have. Time to kick back and relax, right? Not a chance. Because the real adventure, it starts the moment you see the crowd outside your door. Ever dreamed of running your own medical practice? This is not what you imagined. No white coats, no cheery waiting room magazines, no soothing elevator music. Instead, you've got a muddy patch by your hovel, full of villagers, clutching sick children, coughing grandparents, and, if you're lucky, a cow who looks like she's planning her own dramatic exit. Do you take appointments? Only if someone yelling, "My cousin's got the fire rot," counts as a calendar reminder. Step inside and suddenly, your humble one-room home transforms into the hottest medical spot in town. And by hottest, I mean sweatiest. The air is thick with the scent of wet wool, wood smoke, and just a hint of livestock panic. Welcome to the medieval ER. Population, everyone who's out of better options. Your patients don't hold back. They'll describe symptoms in detail that would make even a seasoned apothecary reach for the smelling salts. Burning limbs, shriveled skin, milk that turned evil overnight. Yes, evil milk. That's definitely on you somehow. Is it a curse, bad luck, or just what happens when you leave cheese next to the hearth for 3 days? Who knows? Certainly not you. At least, not until you try to look wise and nod a lot. Your diagnostic tools? Sharp eyes, a brave nose, and the memory of which villagers made it to market after your last remedy. You check a brow, inspect a wound, and try not to wince at anything green that isn't meant to be. Treatment is creative. You grab your comfrey and your spider webs, because nothing says, "I know what I'm doing," like slapping nature's own sticky bandage on a cut. For coughs, you mix up something so bitter it should come with a warning label. May cure you, may haunt your dreams. Exact dosages? Not a thing. FDA approval? Not even invented. If you're feeling extra ambitious, you add a whispered prayer or a little chant, because why not hedge your bets? Sometimes you go with Latin for the church crowd. Sometimes the old pagan charm for those who wink knowingly. And then, the finishing touch. A blessed amulet. A tied ribbon. Maybe a spare chicken feather. Does it work? Honestly, sometimes it's just about giving worried parents something to hold on to. If the patient gets better, you're a miracle worker. If not, well, there's always a new rumor in town. Lucky you. Here's the deal. Every remedy is a gamble. The line between healer and witch is about as thin as your patience by sunset. Feeling confident? Didn't think so. So you wipe your hands on your tunic, which by now is less fabric and more biohazard, and see who's next in line. Is it the man with the swollen leg, or the cow who just sneezed at you? Either way, you're in for another round. No pressure, just another day in the medieval clinic, where word travels faster than you can mix a tea, and everyone's always got an opinion. You've patched up boils, handed out herbal teas of questionable effectiveness, and waved your last patient off with a smile that says, "Good luck, you'll need it." Think the hardest part of your day is over? Not even close. Now comes the real test. Surviving the medieval rumor mill. A system far more efficient, and definitely more dangerous, than anything the internet ever dreamed up. Are you one of those people who worries about privacy settings? Do you spend time curating your digital image, blocking nosy relatives, or maybe hiding that one embarrassing photo from college? Forget it. In this world, everyone is watching, everyone is talking, and there's no delete button. Only pitchforks. Step outside your hovel for some fresh air, or at least air not thick with sweat and sage, and you'll feel it. A subtle, prickling shift in the atmosphere. That's not the weather changing, that's gossip. It's everywhere, swirling, silent, and sticky as the summer flies. The women at the well, suddenly all business, buckets clanking and voices dropping to whispers as you approach. Children who moments before were rolling in mud now cling to their mothers, staring at you with that perfect blend of awe and, will she turn me into a frog? You're not just another villager anymore. You're that woman. The one with the strange plants, the two knowing eyes, the one who sometimes makes things better. Or, if you ask old Martha, a lot worse. You try to mind your business, maybe offer a friendly wave or a quick, "Lovely weather for drying laundry, isn't it?" But every glance, every sudden silence, is another invisible vote. Is she helpful or is she dangerous? And yes, you could explain for the 1000th time that talking to yourself is called thinking. But that explanation just gets you more side-eye. Rumors here travel faster than the plague and stick around longer than a November cough. Did you hear about Martha's cow? Baby won't stop crying since she got that potion. These aren't just idle stories. They're more like a do-it-yourself witch trial kit, and you're the craft project. You become a master at reading the signs, the way a neighbor yanks in her laundry when you pass, as if you're made of contagious shadows. The farmer who mutters a blessing just a little too loud. The universal trick of everyone suddenly discovering fascinating specks of dirt when you make eye contact. It's a dance, one you never signed up for, where the prize is survival, and the only real move is don't attract too much attention. And don't get too comfortable. Every crop that fails, every fever that lingers, every odd noise in the night is another entry in your very unofficial, very dangerous, maybe she's a witch file. Did the thunder bring the lightning, or was it you? Did the pig die of disease, or did you give it the evil eye? Why bother with complicated explanations when blame the healer is so much easier? And just to keep things interesting, the priest is always listening. Always. Like a medieval version of incognito mode, except he's everywhere, and he's not even pretending to mind his own business. So, you keep your head down, smile when you have to, and remind yourself, if surviving on the margins feels like starring in a reality show where the stakes are possibly burned at the stake, well, that's pretty much exactly right. So, you think the village rumor mill is exhausting? Wait until you meet the church. Gossip might sting, sure, but you can brush it off, eventually. The shadow of the local priest, though, that's not just a nuisance. That's an existential weather system with a habit of settling right over your house. Let's talk about Father Thomas. Or maybe he's Father Grzegos, or Brother Petrus. The name changes, but the frown and the unblinking gaze stay the same. He glides around the village, rosary in hand, like a medieval drone with a direct uplink to the divine. You'd think he's just out blessing the fields, but you know what's really going on. Surveillance. Every time someone recovers from your tea, every time a mysterious rash fades, or, heaven forbid, a fever gets worse, you can practically feel him adding a note to your file. You ever get that feeling someone's watching you? Like a cold breeze on a sunny day, or a cat judging you from across the room. That's the priest. He's always there. Sometimes actually there. Sometimes just a presence you can't shake. He's got a spiritual radar dialed to maximum heresy. And when he approaches, you know you're in for an interrogation disguised as casual conversation. Been attending Mass, sister? Seen any strange lights in the forest? Maybe a peculiar glow? Your elderberry wine, does it really make people dream of talking squirrels or something? Less holy. He smiles, oh yes, but the eyes? Colder than the bottom of a well in January. You try to look harmless, mumble something about God's mercy, and definitely do not mention the jar of mushrooms hidden under your bed. You get good at these chats. You offer pious answers, talk about the weather. Maybe even pretend you're not sure how that ointment cured the rash. Divine providence, Father, must have been the Lord's work. Admitting ignorance? Always safer than looking too clever. Around here, humble is your best defense. Better even than that lucky chicken bone amulet you made last Lent. Because the church has rules, very strict rules, about who gets to talk to God, who's allowed to interpret signs, and, especially, who's authorized to hand out mysterious-smelling potions. Spoiler, it's not usually the woman with dirt under her fingernails who lives by the swamp. Miracles? Great, as long as they're church-approved. So, when you cure a fever, it's thank God. But if you get caught mid-poultice with a few too many roots and maybe a whiff of something magical, suddenly it's demonic influence, or worse, witchcraft. And if Father Thomas decides you're trouble, he can do a lot more than just frown at you during Mass. He can preach against you, start a formal inquiry, or just make sure that everyone knows talking to you is basically a fast track to damnation. His shadow? It's long. His patience for folk remedies? Shorter than a January afternoon. So you bow, mumble another prayer, and hope he walks on by before he asks what's in that new extra potent sleeping draught you've been brewing. Just herbs, Father. Honest. And if people start dreaming about talking squirrels, well, that's between them and the Lord.
It's Sunday. The church bell rings out across the village, calling everyone to spiritual comfort, or, if you're in my shoes, to a weekly public trial by side eye. Think you can skip Mass? Not a chance. In medieval Europe, this isn't just about saving your soul. It's the village's main event. Equal parts holy ritual, town gossip, and Olympic-level piety performance. Hope you like being the main attraction? You pull on your cleanest tunic, which is to say, the one least likely to stand up on its own. It still smells of wood smoke, and maybe just a touch of someone lived through a plague in this. That's Sunday best for you. Ready? Time for the slow, awkward parade down the muddy path to church. You know that feeling when you walk into a party and realize everyone was just talking about you? Multiply that by 100, add some incense, and sprinkle in a dash of existential dread. Neighbors cross themselves a little too aggressively as you pass, just in case. Children who normally chase pigs for fun freeze and stare, as if you might cast a hex with your gaze. And the men? Suddenly, they've discovered a deep, spiritual connection to their own shoes. Smile. Nod. Walk faster. Inside, the church is thick with the smell of old incense and older armpits, and you wedge yourself into the back pew. Close to the door, naturally. Humility? Not exactly. It's called a strategic exit plan. You never know when the sermon will take an unexpected detour into those who dance with the devil. Fun, right? Mass is a routine you know by heart. Chants in Latin, confusing lyrics, catchy melody, lots of kneeling and standing, your joints are not fans, and the communion wafer, a culinary adventure in how dry can bread possibly get. But your focus isn't on the heavens. It's on Father Thomas, watching you like a cat watching the one mouse that keeps escaping. It's on the village matriarchs, counting every time you cross yourself. Was that too fast? Too slow? Did you nod at the right moment? You're not paranoid if everyone really is watching. Every gesture is a test. Every silence is suspicious. Did you look humble enough? Did you bow at the right angle? Blink twice if you're not a witch. Then comes the passing of the peace, a chance to shake hands and prove you're one of the flock. Except in your case, the flock is a little hesitant. Some avoid your hand like you've dipped it in hot coals. Others offer a quick, nervous nod, the medieval equivalent of, "Don't tag me in this photo." It's not exactly a warm embrace, so you focus on the pew's splinters and pray for the sermon to end before someone brings up sick livestock, blighted crops, or that woman at the edge of the village. Because, let's be honest, if a cow sneezes next week, you know who's getting the blame. You endure the last hymn, the blessing, and then slip out into the sunlight, not so much spiritually refreshed, as relieved to have survived another week's communal judgment. Mass, the original spiritual workout. See you next Sunday. Congratulations. You've made it through Mass without being excommunicated, or, let's be honest, loudly gossiped about more than usual. Ready to relax? Of course not. There are still bills to pay, mouths to feed, and an alarming shortage of actual currency. So where do you go to earn your daily bread? The medieval marketplace, where hopes, fears, and every form of wishful thinking are for sale, if you don't mind a little dirt with your transaction. Are you picturing a proper apothecary, neat jars on polished shelves, sunlight glinting on glass? Maybe an online shop, reviews included? Nope. Your business is a blanket on the ground, loaded with whatever you could scrounge from forest, field, and the back of your own cupboards. This isn't science. This is spectacle. And you, my friend, are the ringmaster of wishful thinking. Let's talk inventory. You've got wooden amulets, mostly twigs with delusions of grandeur. But does the anxious farmer need to know that? Of course not. With the spirit of the ancient forest inside, you claim, giving it a little dramatic flourish. Never mind that the only thing ancient about it is the splinter it'll give you. Next up, sachets, little pouches of dried lavender, mugwort, and mystery dust. Good for nightmares, bad dreams, or, with a little wink, particularly talkative relatives. You always say it's for sleep. Always. Some secrets are best kept in the family. And then the showstoppers, love charms and fertility potions. The recipes? Top secret, naturally, unless you've ever smelled a rose, plucked some thyme, and found a stick of chalk. But here's the trick. Bury it under the new moon, facing east, while reciting 3 Hail Marys backwards. Or wear it close to your heart for 3 days, then boil it with a lock of their hair. Do they work? Well, if love is blind, hope is even more nearsighted. And what about payment? If you're expecting coins, prepare for disappointment. The medieval economy is all about barter. Eggs that look older than you feel, beans so dry they rattle, and on a really good day, a bit of cloth that's only slightly moldy. You take it all, because starvation is a more urgent problem than a bad review. Besides, who needs Yelp when you've got old Marjorie loudly comparing your love potions to water from the laundry tub? Thanks, Marjorie. As you sit behind your blanket of dreams, you watch the crowd. Some villagers sneak over, glancing around as if they're buying contraband. Others stomp up, desperation written across their faces, ready to risk their soul for a night's rest or a better harvest. You meet them all with the same smile, half comfort, half conspiracy. Selling hope is a risky business, but it's still a business. Of course, not everyone is thrilled with your entrepreneurial spirit. The official vendors scowl at you, the guards hover, and there's always that one person who insists loudly that you're a fraud, while quietly slipping a sachet into their pocket. One wrong promise, one miracle cure that doesn't pan out, and your cozy corner becomes center stage for a very different sort of public performance. Welcome to the market of hope, where every sale is a gamble, every smile is a negotiation, and you, the purveyor of charms and curiosities, walk the finest line in town. So, the market's winding down. You've managed to swap your charms and hopeful sachets for enough food to avoid the dreaded surprise fasting. Success, right? If only. Because in medieval Europe, no good deed goes unpunished, and no bad luck goes unblamed. Did you think your work was done when the market stalls packed up? Not even close. The sun gets higher, the air thickens, and suddenly the village square transforms, from a place of trading to a theater of accusation. And guess who's always front row? Center stage. That's right, you. Ever notice how in this world nothing is just bad luck? Oh no. If something goes wrong, people want a story, and preferably a villain with a familiar face. That pig that just keeled over, the child with a fever, the miller's grain, mysteriously spoiled. Clearly you're to blame. Forget the murky pond water, the rat-infested granaries, or the fact that pigs sometimes just die. No, the universe prefers its misfortune delivered by hand. And who better than the local wise woman? You might be minding your own business, trying to chew on a lump of cheese that tastes like melancholy when it starts. A shout from the livestock pen, an angry scuffle by the well, and, like moths to a particularly unlucky flame, everyone's eyes turn your way. You know that feeling when you spill coffee at work and everyone just happens to look over. Multiply that by plague and paranoia. Here they come. My cow stopped giving milk after you walked by my barn. My husband's back pain came back after your ointment. Did you curse him? Do you try to explain mastitis? No one wants to hear about cow hygiene right now. Do you suggest maybe, just maybe, the husband shouldn't lift sacks like he's in a medieval CrossFit competition? That'll go over well. So you nod, offer soothing words about God's mysterious ways and the unpredictable humors, and pray no one asks for a demonstration of your real powers. Internally, you consider if a calming blend of henbane might be more for you than for them. Here's the truth. You're not just a person. You're the village's lightning rod for disaster. If the church steeple gets struck, they'll remember that time you frowned at the priest. If the river floods, someone's cousin will swear you were seen collecting reeds, obviously hexing the water. It's a never-ending dance. Deflect, reassure, don't get angry. Anger, as everyone knows, is the first step on the road to witchcraft. And above all, don't let them see how much this wears you down. Because the real weight isn't the sack of herbs you carry. It's the invisible load of every fear, every whisper, every coincidence that needs a scapegoat. Welcome to the role nobody wants, but someone always gets. The village's favorite explanation for everything that's wrong. Try not to trip over the blame on your way home. The sun is finally sinking, painting the sky with those bruised, uncertain colors you know so well. A medieval sunset. Beautiful, but mostly just a sign that you've survived another day. You've made it through the market, weathered the glares and the blame, and all you want now is the dubious comfort of your straw mat and another romantic dinner for one. Gruel again. But peace in your line of work? That's about as likely as a village dentist. Just as you're contemplating whether sleep will come before the fleas, a shadow blocks your doorway. No polite knock, no awkward shuffling, just a presence. You know the type. Someone who doesn't want medicine, but something much, much riskier. He's big, gruffer, and smells like he lost a fight with a keg of ale. The kind of man who looks like he's never met a boundary he didn't want to cross. In his hand, a heavy pouch of coins. Actual money. Uh-oh. He doesn't waste time. He's desperate, his eyes wild. My daughter's been overlooked. He growls. A wasting sickness. My chickens won't lay. He doesn't want a remedy. He wants a curse. Pause for a moment. Imagine you're on a game show, and the prize for the wrong answer is, well, historically speaking, not great. Healing fevers is one thing. Cursing people? That's a one-way ticket to trial by fire, courtesy of your friendly neighborhood Inquisition. Here's the tightrope. Refuse him, and he'll say you're unhelpful, or, worse, working with his enemies. Agree, and if anything bad happens, congratulations. You're officially the local sorceress, and your next audience might be carrying torches. He believes in curses with all the conviction of a man who's out of options. And in this world, belief is contagious and dangerous. So you buy time, nodding sagely about the will of the saints. And natural balance, you improvise a binding ritual, a few dried herbs, some dramatic gestures, a rhyme that sounds serious but isn't, and instructions to bury a knotted string at midnight. Medieval placebo at its finest. Enough ceremony to convince, but not enough to actually do anything, except maybe trespass. He leaves, coin in hand, eyes still burning with that wild, desperate hope. You count the money. Enough for bread? For now, but your gut is tighter than ever. If bad luck finds his enemies, he'll think your magic worked. If nothing happens, he might come back, angrier, poorer, and more dangerous. You're not a witch. You're just someone trying to survive in a world where faith, fear, and desperation blur into something sharp and unpredictable. As darkness settles, you lie awake, knowing that even the best performance has consequences. Sleep well, if you can. Tomorrow's another day. And out here, that's never a guarantee. Night has truly fallen. The last scraps of daylight have vanished, and the only light left is a scatter of distant fires. Pinpricks in the dark, each one another world you're not quite part of. Outside, the wind sighs through the village, carrying with it the echoes of other people's lives. Inside your hovel, it's just you, the memory of your unwanted client, and the heavy, unsettling silence that presses in from every side. Ever tried social distancing for, your entire life? Congratulations, you're a trendsetter, centuries ahead of your time. The day's performance is over. No more forced smiles, no more soothing words for the angry or the desperate. It's just you and your thoughts, looping back over every encounter, every accusation dodged, every remedy sold with a prayer that it does more good than harm. You're the village's last hope and its favorite scapegoat, needed but never trusted. You'd talk it out with a friend, if you had one, but village folk healer support group isn't a thing, and the only local therapist is the priest, who probably has other ideas about your problems. Ever wish there was an herb for loneliness? Sorry, nothing in the garden for that, unless you count strong ale, and even that's just a temporary fix. You poke at the fire, coaxing a few last embers into warmth. The smoke twists upward, curling like thoughts you can't quite let go. You understand the villagers' fears, the priest's suspicion, the church's certainty, the difference between faith and pure, shrieking superstition. But who understands you? That's the question that settles in your chest, heavier than any curse you've ever been accused of casting. No secret covens, no midnight support circles, no witches' WhatsApp group for mutual advice and gossip. You're alone with your knowledge, your instincts, and the uncomfortable gift of being just a little too different in a world built on sameness. It's not just the cold of the hovel that seeps in. It's the realization that you are both essential and outcast, always needed, never truly welcome. So you sit and listen to the fire die, replaying the day's parade of anxieties. The client who wanted a curse, the priest's gaze, heavy as a millstone, the silent, shared suspicion of a village forever on the lookout for the next scapegoat. Your reputation? It's not just a shield or a weapon, it's a cage. And tonight, it feels smaller than ever. You curl up, searching for sleep and the slim hope that dreams will bring a little peace. After all, in this life, the subscription fee is sky high, and the cancellation policy, let's just say, non-existent. Now the hovel is swallowed by the deepest part of night, a darkness that feels less like the absence of light, and more like a heavy, breathing thing pressed right up against your ribs. The fire is out, your blanket is barely worth its name, and the only warmth left is the memory of how long today was. Sleep should be a refuge, right? A soft oblivion after all the suspicion, the accusations, the endless balancing act of village life. But for you, our unlucky, wise woman, even sleep has its price. You could call it your brain's very own unskippable horror movie, coming soon to a straw mat near you. There's no deep, restorative slumber here, no gentle fade into blissful dreams. Instead, every sound, the scritch of a mouse, a distant howl, a creak that might just be the wind or, your impending doom, jolts you halfway awake. You lie there, eyes wide in the dark, replaying the day in your head. The priest's gaze, the client's plea for a curse, the whispers at the market. It's a highlight reel you never asked for, on endless loop. Every possible misstep, every moment that might turn tomorrow into a medieval mob scene. And then, finally, dreams come. But not the good kind. No flying, no winning the medieval lottery, no happily ever after. You're gathering herbs, and suddenly every plant sprouts eyes, staring you down. You're at Mass, and the wafer crumbles into bitter ash. You're mixing a potion, but the brew turns to writhing snakes, or worse, faces you couldn't save, blaming you with silent, spectral accusation. Sometimes the very herbs meant to help, just a trace of henbane or a whiff of mandrake, leak into your dreams, and suddenly you're flying. Not in a good way, more like a wild, out-of-control medieval VR demo with bonus anxiety. Maybe you chat with animals who speak in riddles, or glimpse futures that are always bleak. The mob is never far. Neither is the fire. No sanctuary, even here. You wake before dawn, cold, tired, and already bracing yourself for the day ahead. Tomorrow's nightmares are just waiting their turn. And so, dear listener, your 24 hours are finally up. You've survived waking in a hovel that does double duty as a barn, endured a breakfast of despair-flavored gruel, braved the wilds in search of medicinal weeds, and handed out cures that were as much hope as herbal science. You've navigated village politics, side-eyed the local priest, and danced around a desperate client who wanted something darker than any medicine. Most importantly, you've lived a day on the knife's edge, always one step away from being the villain in someone else's story. Would you last another day? Let's be honest. No. Not even close. We modern folk, with our hot showers, painkillers, and Google diagnosis, would crumble before lunchtime. A day without Wi-Fi? A day with a real chance of being accused of witchcraft because your parsley grew a little too well? Pass. But those medieval villagers, priests, peasants, even the witches, they endured. They found laughter and love in the shadows, somehow carried hope through hunger, fear, and fire. They built the world we inherit, even if they didn't leave us the instruction manual. So, as the last echoes of medieval night fade, and the reality of your own bed returns, maybe you'll savor your next cup of instant coffee, or look at the pharmacy shelf with a whole new kind of reverence. No need to survive medieval Europe. Just remember it, maybe even respect it, and be grateful for the long, winding journey to here and now. Now, close your eyes, let go of the ancient worries, and drift. If you dream tonight, may it be free of mobs and mass, and full of soft blankets, warm bread, and a world where the only magic you need is the magic of a good night's sleep. And if you're still awake, here's a little bonus. Let's lift the veil on the real story behind the witch hunts. Because while living as a cunning woman was rough, the true storm of fear, suspicion, and tragedy swept across Europe and beyond for centuries. Here are a few facts, twists, and historical absurdities from the real witch hunts, reminding us that sometimes truth is stranger than any nightmare. You've just spent a day in the shoes of a medieval cunning woman, doing your best to survive suspicion and keep your head down. But as harsh as that world was, it was only a tiny ripple in a much larger, much darker tide of fear and persecution that swept across Europe, and eventually even the early American colonies. This was the era of the infamous witch hunts, a centuries-long storm that was far less about magic and far more about fear, anxiety, and the desperate search for someone to blame. Imagine a society in constant turmoil, plagues, crop failures, wars, and sweeping religious upheaval. In this world, uncertainty was everywhere, and people wanted answers. Why did the cow die? Why did the child get sick? Why did the beer turn sour overnight? The simplest, most frightening answer? Witchcraft. But witchcraft wasn't always seen as a vast, diabolical plot. In the beginning, it often meant maleficium, using magic to cause harm. Maybe your neighbor gave you a bad look, and suddenly your chickens stopped laying eggs. It was a local problem, usually solved with home remedies or, at worst, a scolding. Then, in the 14th and 15th centuries, things changed. Witchcraft became more than just a village annoyance. It was redefined as heresy, a direct pact with the devil himself. Now, it wasn't just about causing trouble for your neighbor. It was an existential threat to the entire Christian order. This dramatic shift was helped along by a book called Malleus Maleficarum, The Hammer of Witches, published in 1487. It served as a guide for hunting, prosecuting, and punishing supposed witches, transforming the witch from a local scapegoat into a public enemy, believed to be in league with Satan. With witchcraft now officially classified as heresy, the door was open for both church and state to respond with extreme measures, torture, execution, and a wave of mass paranoia that would shape European society for generations. So, the stage is set. Fear, paranoia, and a handy manual on how to find your local devil worshipper. But who exactly were these witches that society was so terrified of? If you're picturing a glamorous, green-skinned villain with a cackling laugh, you've been watching too many movies. The reality was far more mundane and far more tragic. For the most part, around 75 to 80% across Europe and British America, the accused and executed were women. Were these women powerful sorceresses? Nope. More often than not, they were women on the margins, the unmarried, the widowed, the elderly, or just anyone a bit different. Picture the village eccentric, the woman who lived alone and talked to her cat, which, by the way, probably got her a one-way ticket to the gallows. Often they were over 40, past their childbearing years, making them, in the charming medieval mindset, less useful and thus more expendable. Misogyny, you ask? Oh, it was the unspoken bedrock of the entire phenomenon. But here's where it gets interesting, because history, like a good medieval mystery, always has twists. While women dominated the victim list in most places, there were some surprising exceptions. Did you know that in Iceland, a whopping 90% of those accused were men? Or in Normandy, it was 73% men. Even in Russia, men made up the majority of cases. Why the difference? Well, it wasn't a sudden surge of male warlocks. These regional variations highlight that while the underlying fear of magic was universal, the exact target profile was shaped by local culture, legal systems, and what kind of perceived threat was most convenient. In places like Russia, where they focused less on the devil pact and more on simple harmful magic, porcha, men were often accused because of their roles as lower clergy or court officials. It seems no one was safe, regardless of gender, if they happened to hold a position of slight influence or just existed differently. And let's not forget the kids. Oh yes, children were dragged into this mess too. They were both accusers. Think Salem, where teenage girls famously pointed fingers. And chillingly, the accused. We have records of children being imprisoned, tortured, and even executed. Why? Because it was widely believed that witchcraft could be inherited. So, if Mum or Dad was a witch, little Timmy was probably one too. Imagine the family dinners. The common image of the old, eccentric woman as the archetypal witch? That's largely an Anglo-American phenomenon. The data reveals a far more complex and terrifyingly arbitrary demographic. It shows us that these hunts weren't just about rooting out evil. They were about controlling knowledge, suppressing dissent, especially female folk medicine, and managing social tensions in communities that lacked proper ways to resolve conflicts. From a wise woman to a witch, it was a short, brutal step. So, we've established who was generally targeted. But how did someone go from being a regular, mud-stained villager to standing accused of consorting with the devil? It wasn't always a dramatic midnight ritual. More often, it was a slow, insidious creep of suspicion, fueled by everyday life and, frankly, a lot of bad luck. Many of those eventually accused of witchcraft were, ironically, the very people your medieval community relied on: the cunning folk, wise women, or local healers. These were the folks who delivered babies, found lost items, dabbled in fortune-telling, and, most crucially, treated illnesses with herbs and remedies. Think of them as your friendly neighborhood, unregulated primary care physicians. They were often respected and sought after. But here's the rub. As more formalized, male-dominated medicine started to emerge, often sanctioned by the church, these independent healers became rivals. Their traditional practices, once accepted, could now be reinterpreted as maleficium, harmful magic. So, the woman who cured your child's fever last week might suddenly be seen as the one who caused your neighbor's cow to drop dead, especially if a new, more official doctor came to town. It's a classic case of professional jealousy, medieval style. And how did these accusations begin? Not with a grand prophecy, but with the mundane misfortunes of daily life. A cow dies. A child gets sick. Because, let's be real, medieval sanitation was a myth. The beer spoils, a tragedy of epic proportions. A storm ruins the crops. In a pre-scientific world, these weren't random events. They needed an explanation. And if that misfortune happened to follow a quarrel with an unpopular person or someone you just didn't like, well, there was your convenient culprit. Refuse to share your cabbage? Your neighbor's baby dies, and suddenly you're the witch. It's the ultimate correlation equals causation fallacy, with deadly consequences. Beyond the mundane, accusations could also stem from personal vendettas, economic rivalries, or even political maneuvering. If you were a wealthy individual, especially a woman with property, accusing you of witchcraft was a great way for someone to get their hands on your stuff. Think of it as medieval asset forfeiture, with extra steps and fire. Even religious divisions, particularly after the Reformation, fueled the fire, as different factions accused each other of diabolical leanings. So, from a simple squabble over a boundary line to a national religious crisis, the witch was always there, a convenient target for society's anxieties. It truly highlights humanity's desperate need for a scapegoat, especially when things go wrong. Because apparently it's easier to blame a magical conspiracy than admit your cow just had bad digestion. So, you've been accused. Your neighbor's cow died, or perhaps you merely looked at someone funny, and now the village consensus has deemed you a witch. What happens next? Forget due process, a fair trial, or even the presumption of innocence. You're entering the medieval justice system, which was less about uncovering truth and more about confirming pre-existing biases, often with extreme prejudice. The trials themselves had some truly unique legal standards. We're talking about half-proofs, rumors, gossip, or spectral evidence, where a victim claimed to see your ghost tormenting them in a vision or dream. Your lawyer trying to establish an alibi? Useless. They believed witchcraft didn't require your physical presence. So, if you were knitting quietly at home while the cow died, well, your spectral self could have been out there cursing it. And then there was the delightful hunt for the devil's mark, or witch's teat. A mole, a scar, any unusual blemish on your body that was supposedly where you suckled demons. Witch hunters would meticulously and painfully search your entire body, poking and prodding with needles. If you didn't bleed, or didn't feel pain, that was instant proof. Spoiler, some clever witch hunters had retractable needles. Just saying. And when evidence was scarce, or simply not convenient enough, there was always torture. Because nothing makes you confess to a pact with the devil like extreme physical agony, right? After 1468, the Pope declared witchcraft a crimen exceptum, an exceptional crime, which basically removed all legal limitations on using torture. It was open season. Common methods included the strappado, where you were hung by your bound wrists until your shoulders dislocate, sometimes with added weights, or thumbscrews and leg vices designed to crush bones and inflict unimaginable pain. Some charming English witch hunters, like the infamous Matthew Hopkins, preferred sleep deprivation, keeping victims awake for up to 72 hours. And of course, the water test, or swimming a witch, where you were bound and thrown into water. If you floated, you were guilty. The water, being pure, rejected you. If you sank, you were innocent, but conveniently usually drowned. A win-win for the accusers, a lose-lose for you. Perhaps the most absurd aspect of these trials was the very nature of the accusations. People were tried, condemned, and executed for the most mundane or bizarre offenses. Being sarcastic? Guilty. Not hearing a question? Possibly due to deafness? Guilty. Slamming a church door with the devil's steady hand? Absolutely guilty. Lifting a heavy musket? Clearly you had supernatural strength. A flock of birds landing on your head? Blatant demonic communication? Laughing at the accusations? Proof of your hardened, evil heart. Even your own 4-year-old child could be compelled to testify against you. These peculiar standards reveal a legal system fundamentally designed to find guilt, not justice. It wasn't about truth. It was about confirming terrifying, preconceived notions of evil. And the scales of justice, my friends, were tilted not by truth, but by terror. And the water always won. So you've seen the grim reality of accusations, the brutal trials, and the horrifying forms of justice. But how did this dark chapter of history morph into the pop culture image we know today? And what was truly absurd about it? Let's dive into some of the most enduring myths and the bizarre realities behind them. First, let's talk about the numbers. When you think of witches burned at the stake, do you imagine millions? A vast, countless horde? Well, prepare for a dose of historical reality. The often quoted figure of 9 million women burned as witches is a massive, massive exaggeration. While terrifying enough, modern research estimates that between 40,000 and 60,000 people were executed for witchcraft across Europe and British America from 1450 to 1750, with about 75–80% of them being women. Still horrific, absolutely, but not 9 million. This myth, despite being wildly inaccurate, persists because it powerfully symbolizes the historical trauma and the persecution of women. It's like a historical urban legend that just won't die, proving how emotional impact often trumps factual accuracy in our collective memory. And what about the classic witch iconography? The brooms, the pointy hats, the black cats. Are these accurate depictions of your medieval cunning woman? Not quite. The earliest known image of a witch on a broomstick dates to 1451, and interestingly, the first person to actually confess to flying on a broom was a man, Guillaume Edelin. This association might have stemmed from pagan fertility rituals, where farmers danced astride poles. No, seriously. Or perhaps from hallucinogenic ointments applied to staffs, which, if true, definitely explains the flying sensation. It became more widespread later, oddly intertwining with symbols of female domesticity. And black cats? Originally, these sleek felines were revered, even considered good luck by sailors in the early Middle Ages. Their negative association, linking them to satanic rituals and familiars, demonic helpers, only began around the 12th and 13th centuries. The irony? The mass killing of black cats, driven by this baseless fear, is actually believed to have contributed to the spread of the Black Death by removing a natural predator of rats. So, in their desperate attempt to fight evil, they accidentally unleashed a plague. Talk about an epic fail. Finally, the witches' Sabbath, those gruesome, wild nocturnal gatherings where witches supposedly worshipped the devil, engaged in orgies, and committed unspeakable acts like cannibalism and child sacrifice. Sounds like a fun Saturday night, right? Good news. There is absolutely no credible historical evidence that such physical gatherings ever took place. These elaborate, grotesque descriptions were a theological and legal invention of the 15th century, often extracted through torture. It was a brilliant, horrifying piece of propaganda designed to justify mass persecution by portraying witches as part of a vast, organized, anti-Christian conspiracy. These myths weren't observations of reality. They were doctrinal views, terrifying narratives constructed to legitimate extreme measures. So next time you see a cartoon witch on a broom with a black cat, remember the twisted, terrifying history behind those seemingly innocent symbols. So, we've journeyed through the grim, absurd, and terrifying reality of the witch hunts. You've seen how fear, misinformation, and a sprinkle of bad luck could turn an ordinary person into a condemned witch. But what's the takeaway from all this? Is it just a dusty old chapter in history, or does it still echo in our modern world? Well, let's talk about the infamous Salem witch trials, 1692 to 1693. Here's ours a shocker. Despite their legendary status, only 19 people were hanged in Salem, 1 was pressed to death, and a few more died in jail. Brutal, absolutely, but a tiny fraction compared to the tens of thousands executed in Europe. So why is Salem the poster child for witch hunts? It wasn't about scale, it was about narrative. Salem had incredibly detailed historical records, a highly literate population eager to write about it, and a powerful story that became a cautionary tale for American values. The dangers of mass hysteria, religious extremism, false accusations, and the absolute abandonment of due process. Europe's hunts, though far more devastating, often lacked this neat, unifying narrative. Now, for the chilling part. Are we done with witch hunts? Not really, just the pointy hats and actual fires. Think about cancel culture. When online mobs instantly condemn someone for a perceived moral flaw, a wrong opinion, or simply being disliked, without much in the way of a fair hearing or the presumption of innocence. The consequences, loss of career, reputation, mental health, often vastly outweigh the alleged transgression. Sound familiar? It's the same human tendency to find a scapegoat, to externalize our anxieties, and to demonize anyone who deviates from the perceived norm. The only difference is the digital pyre. The witch hunts were not a monolithic phenomenon, but a complex tapestry woven from theological shifts, legal quirks, socioeconomic anxieties, and deeply rooted human fears. They evolved from local squabbles to widespread, state-sanctioned persecution. While the specific beliefs in magic and devils have largely faded in the West, the underlying psychological and social mechanisms of witch hunts remain strikingly similar. The absurdity of historical accusations finds its reflection in the often trivial reasons for modern cancellations. So, from burning stakes to digital flames, humanity's tendency to seek a scapegoat remains eerily familiar. Perhaps we haven't come as far as we like to think. But by understanding this dark chapter, we're compelled to critically examine our own societal dynamics and champion reason, empathy, and justice in the face of fear. Because, ultimately, the greatest magic isn't in spells or curses, but in learning from the past to build a more rational, compassionate future. And so ends this darker chapter of history. Today we think of witches as fairy tale characters or Halloween costumes, but the echoes of those old fears and persecutions still linger. The story of the witch hunts reminds us just how easily a frightened society can turn on its own, searching for simple answers to difficult problems. Perhaps that's why it matters to remember, so we can rest a little easier, knowing the real magic is in empathy, not accusation. Good night. May your dreams be free of suspicion and full of peace. Good night.